Hmm? Hmm. Alright, what is that? What the Mettaton? What are you doing here? How did you even hear about me? Papyrus. Look, Mr. Mettaton, sir. He was? Look, I appreciate the offer, but you're here way too early. Yeah, well, you're fashionably a week too early. I'd prefer to wait every 10 episodes before I cover those from the underground, that way I don't oversaturate things for those who'd rather see other characters. You do? Well, good. I'm glad we settled that then. Oh, I actually haven't decided yet. You know what? Why not? I'm game. Ugh. Mettaton, the Underground's most popular robotic celebrity. I mean, he's the only celebrity that they had, but hey, that's better than nothing, I guess. He, of course, contrary to what he'd like you to believe, didn't start out like this. At first, he was just a simple little ghost who, according to Papyrus's headcanon, was named Hapstablook, one who worked on a snail farm along with his cousin, Napstablook. That is until one day when he was approached by a woman named Alphys, and was given the opportunity of an afterlife time. She made him a new robotic body, one that would allow him to follow the dreams for stardom that he couldn't achieve as a simple little snail farmer. Along with being given a much more photogenic body, he also had the functions of being a human eradication robot, mostly done so Alphys could impress King Asgore, and it did ultimately lead to the king hiring her to be the new royal scientist. I'm not quite sure though which functionality came first, the game seems to contradict itself on that front, but I'd like to assume that the Murderbot stuff came first based on certain contexts. But regardless, Mettaton will be using his usual mix of entertainer and Terminator as he makes his debut in Super Smash Bros. Now, I'm sure as most of you have already guessed, the form I've shown for Mettaton here is not all there is to them. For this moveset, he'd be able to... What? Oh, who are you kidding? Most everyone who already knows who you are already knows about it. Mettaton would be a very heavy character with pretty sluggish mobility. He'd have 2 jumps and no additional movement options. So while Mettaton would be a fairly basic kind of fighter, his most defining attribute is that he will always be facing the screen. He wants to make sure that everyone can always see his face after all. The way to tell what direction he's facing will be based on his arms. The arm that indicates his forward direction will be a hand that's constantly waving while he's idle, while his other arm that indicates his behind will be the hand holding his microphone. So whenever he turns around, quote unquote, it'll just have him move his microphone to his other hand and start waving with his now free hand. Now, despite being sluggish, Mettaton will have quite a number of long-range disjointed attacks to help make up for that. So starting with his jab, Mettaton would have a single-hit semi-spammable jab that would have him fire a single laser bullet from his finger straight forwards, similarly to another certain robotic smash fighter. This, however, makes reference to the pea shooter that Alphys gives to Frisk to shoot with. It was an invention by Alphys, just like Mettaton was, so it stands to reason that Mettaton could very well be given the same kind of weapon. For his dash attack, it could have Mettaton do a single cartwheel forwards to launch any foe hit by his body. This will also be the first attack to have a certain aesthetical gimmick that would be so appropriate for Mettaton to have. Mettaton has a habit of dramatically posing after everything that he does, especially when things look at their worst. So for a good majority of his attacks, they'll end with Mettaton doing a flashy pose. It's just like what Incineroar does, except unlike theirs, Mettaton's pose won't change whether he lands or misses. Again, he'll even pose when things look bleak, so he'll always finish certain attacks with a pose to keep the flare going. But also just like Incineroar, the poses aren't necessarily end lag and can be cancelled by doing literally anything else. They're just there because that's just a very Mettaton thing for Mettaton to do. Anyways, for the side tilt, this can have Mettaton do a long-range punch forwards that can be angled. This attack references one of his moves during his boss fight that shows his extending retractable arms. The up tilt can make reference to Mettaton's very first talent that he developed during his rise to stardom: juggling. He'll begin to juggle a couple of balls as well as his microphone, and any foes hit by the juggled objects will be launched. However, they will take slightly more damage if they're hit by the microphone specifically. Now, before I talk about his down tilts, I should make mention that whenever Mettaton crouches, he'll actually do a "draw me like one of your French robots" pose. And for his down tilt, he'll hold this pose and simply swing his wheel from low to high to attack. For his side tilt, he'll up the age rating with some violence by bringing out a chainsaw and stabbing it straight forwards. With it being a chainsaw, it deals a lot of multi-hitting damage before launching with the final hit. This makes reference to when he pulled one out on Frisk during the cooking segment of his show. For the up smash, this can have him strike a pose and yell any of his most iconic lines, and when he does, an onomatopoeia of said line is created right above himself. This onomatopoeia is what hurts foes on contact, but that's not all. Right after the onomatopoeia comes out, the letters all begin to fall and will each explode around Mettaton as they begin to hit the ground, which can also deal damage to foes who may have been able to avoid the onomatopoeia, but were still too close. This makes reference to that joke during the MTT News portion of his show where he said that even his words are. For his down smash, this can have Mettaton retract his wheel to get close to the ground, then spin his body as he holds out his extended arms. His arms are what deal big launching damage. His body can hurt foes too, but that behaves like a sour spot. For his neutral aerial, he can do a pose while surrounding himself with the same blocks that he uses during his fights in Undertale. A bunch would appear and spin around him that would launch foes on contact. The forward air can have Mettaton pull out a bag of flour and throw a cloud of it forwards to deal damage. This references to when he uses flour to try to slow Frisk down as they race for the can of Human Soul Substitute on his cooking show. The back air can be another cake ingredient that he used, this time eggs. He'd pull out a carton and start shaking it behind himself, which would cause a bunch of eggs to fly out to damage foes. While shaking the carton is its own hit, the eggs are small flinching hits that act as projectiles. His up air can have Mettaton fire a single laser bullet straight upwards for a simple ranged projectile aerial. This version of it is a more direct reference to how the Yellow Soul's pea shooter can only be fired upwards. And for the down air, it can have Mettaton drop the third of his cake ingredients: milk. He'd swing the carton below himself from back to front, which does act as an attack, and as he does, a splash of milk flies out that falls straight down as a projectile. Mettaton can use his extending arm to give himself a long-ranged grab. It wouldn't be a tether grab, just a long-reaching one that can only be used on the ground. He'd pummel by electrocuting his foe by emitting some static from the hand that he's gripping onto them with. And for his throws, he'd show his foe the time of their life as he captivates them with dance. The forward throw would have Mettaton perform a pirouette dance with the foe to spin and send them forwards. The back throw can have him do a heel turn dance to spin and send them backwards. The up throw would have Mettaton throw the foe upwards in the same way that a dancer throws their dance partner into the air. And the down throw would have Mettaton simply turn around and do a trust fall with the foe, slamming them into the ground with his heavy metal body. For Mettaton's neutral special, this can have him use one of his most common weapons that he uses for both the fight and for the dramatics: bombs! Pressing the special button will simply have Mettaton throw a bomb forwards, and after 2 seconds, it'll blow into a plus-shaped explosion. I know there's already a few bombs in Smash that blow up like this, but that's just how Mettaton's bombs explode during his fights, so that's how it be. Also, don't worry, the explosions will not be that huge either. In any which case, to make this special even more dramatic, I'm going to add some randomness to it. Whenever he pulls out a bomb, it'll actually be one of 4 completely different types of explosives. The first is just the normal bomb, a projectile that's affected by gravity and will roll a little bit across the ground. His second will be basketball bombs, another gravity-affected projectile, but this one bounces on the ground. The third can be a present bomb, which doesn't move at all. He'll throw it forwards, but then it'll remain stationary once it hits the ground until it explodes. And finally, the most chaotic bomb will be the explosive and extremely agile glass of water. He'll throw it, and it'll then suddenly lose its mind as it flies all over the place into random directions. It's the smallest, so it will have trouble hitting foes compared to the other 3 bomb types, but it could catch opponents off guard if they're not careful enough. All 4 bombs have an equal chance to appear, and I should also mention that Mettaton is immune to the explosions of his own bombs. As I stated, Mettaton uses bombs quite often for his fights, but the basketball, present, and water glass come from the MTT news segment of his show that he used to torment poor Frisk. There were other objects, but the 3 I chose I felt were enough. And I'm not using the dog bomb. I'm not blowing up dogs. That's just mean and cruel. And anyone who says I should use it, I hate you. Go away. You're not wanted here. I'm not blowing up dogs. I'm making this go on for too long now. Let's move on. For Mettaton's side special, this can have him electrocute foes with a stream of lightning that he can shoot from his finger. This is in reference to what Mettaton does to Frisk whenever they get an incorrect answer during his quiz show when you first meet him. It's a basic stream attack that has Mettaton fire electricity forwards a fair distance. It's not very strong compared to his other attacks, but it can be shot into any direction, and it paralyzes foes on contact. If the button is held down, then the move can be fired for up to 2 seconds before forcing Mettaton into a cooldown. Now for its up special, this can be another simple special that has Mettaton retract his limbs and turn himself into a rocket, one who truly shoots for the stars! In more ways than one. He'll simply fly upwards while spinning his body. He's only able to go up. Why? Because Mettaton will only shoot for the top and refuses anything lower than that. He becomes a hitbox that can drag opponents with him as he flies, dealing small flinching damage in the process. He can be angled as he ascends, and will go into free fall after the move concludes. And finally, the exhaust from under his body can also hurt foes if they somehow touch it. And it can actually spike opponents if they happen to be directly underneath Mettaton the moment he releases the flames of his rocket. And finally, for Mettaton's down special, this is where things are going to get interesting. Pressing it will have Mettaton flip the switch on his back. Which does exactly what I'm fairly certain 99% of you were already expecting to happen. I mean, it's kinda hard to hype something up when everyone knows that it's going to happen. I guess that makes sense. Hey, yeah! Yeah! All right!
Oh, yes.
Using the down special will have Mettaton turn into his much more photogenic form, Mettaton EX. When he becomes this, he'll be the exact opposite of what Mettaton is in his box form. He will be much lighter, being way easier to knock out, just like how he only becomes vulnerable in this state during his boss fight, but he also becomes a whole lot faster and has a lot of combo potential behind his attacks. He'd still only have 2 jumps, but he would gain the ability to do a very stylish wall jump. Now that Mettaton has his new fabulous legs, he's got to show them off. EX would have a 3-hit jab that can lead into a rapid jab. It starts with a roundhouse kick, which leads into a backward spin kick, and then ends with a stab kick. And if you choose to use the rapid jab instead of the stab kick, he'll begin to do a fury of rapid kicks, Chun-Li style. His dash attack would have him do 2 ballerina spins while moving forward with a single leg sticking out. The first spin kick would deal flinching damage, and the second kick would be the launching blow. His side tilt can be a quick extending leg stab forwards, referencing his leg attack used during his boss fight. The up tilt can have Mettaton do a dramatic bend backwards as he kicks his foot into the air from low to high. It's great for hitting foes above Mettaton, but can't hit anyone behind him. And once again, when Mettaton crouches, he'll hold this sexy pose, but now even sexier. And for his down tilt, he'll simply lift one of his legs from low to high to kick while continuing to hold this pose. Now for Mettaton EX's side smash, this will have him stab 5 legs forwards somehow. But it's an attack with great coverage and disjoints, but it does have a bit of end lag, so it is one of the EX form's riskier moves to use. His up smash can have Mettaton do a handstand and then stab both legs straight upwards to do an attack that's both deadly and stylish. His legs going up can also drag opponents if they're too close. And his down smash can have Mettaton do a funky break dance, kicking on both sides of himself from front to back as he does so. Now for Mettaton EX's aerial attacks, I'm gonna give him the same moves that I did for Frisk's aerials during their pacifist mode, which, may I remind you, came from Mettaton in the first place. Poses! The neutral air will have Mettaton do a pose that has him do the splits, hitting horizontally on both sides of himself at the same time. The forward air will have him do a pose that kicks one of his legs forwards, likewise for the back air, except his leg will be kicking backwards obviously. His up air can have him do a pose that involves him stabbing both of his arms into the air, and his down throw can have him strike a pose that has him strike his foes below himself with both legs. This is an aerial that can spike. Mettaton EX would grab with one arm and would pummel by stepping on the foe's feet. For his throws, just like with his box form, he'd put on a show as he tangos with his foe. It may be a brand new form, but it's ever the same old Mettaton. His forward throw can have him do a kickball change dance move to kick his foe forwards. The back throw can have him do a peek turn dance to spin the foe and send them backwards. The up throw can have Mettaton do a fan kick dance move to kick the foe into the air. And the down throw can have Mettaton put the foe under his feet and he'd do a tap dance on their back to rack up damage before they get bounced away. For Mettaton EX's neutral special, it can have him turn the arena into a true dance stage and spawn a disco ball above himself, the same one that he uses in your fight against him. The disco ball will be suspended in whatever spot Mettaton spawns it in, and will remain there for 10 seconds at a time before it automatically disappears. It'll emit 5 light beams into opposite directions that continuously circle around the disco ball. These beams will not deal any flinching damage at all. They only deal damage to foes who find themselves in the spotlight. So I certainly hope for your sake that you don't get stage fright. The damage will continuously rack up so long as you're in the light, and how much damage you take depends on what color light you're standing in. There are 2 colors, white and blue. White deals normal damage just from being in it, whereas blue light deals extra damage to foes, but only if they're moving within the light beam. If you're standing still when the blue light passes over you, then it won't deal any damage at all, just like how blue attacks work in Undertale. Foes can attack the disco ball, of course. Each individual strike it takes will shift the light beam's color, just like in the boss fight. but the ball will just break if it sustains 10% of total damage. And one final note, Mettaton can only have one disco ball on screen at a time. If he tries to make a new one, then nothing will happen. Now for his EX form side special, this can have Mettaton shoot the mini box Mettaton holding little parasols, just in case you were missing box Mettaton and wanted a little parasol. He can fire one of these into any cardinal direction. They'll fly for a little bit before slowing down, and once they slow to a crawl, the mini Mettaton will then throw out a little heart with an M on it towards the direction of the closest opponent. This heart flies about the same distance that the mini Mettaton flies before also slowing down and just disappearing. Regardless of which you get hit by, they deal small flinching damage at most, so these really are better to use as a tool for distractions, edge guarding, gimping, or really just however the heck you want to use them. I don't care, you do you. Now, well, actually dropping the pretense here for a second, before I get into Mettaton's up special, let me go ahead and get something out of the way real quick. Mettaton does have a third form that can only be encountered during the genocide route called Mettaton Neo. I will not be incorporating this form, however, mostly due to the fact that, well, to put it bluntly, we know absolute zilch about it. He appears at first as another threatening obstacle for the Kara-possessed Frisk to face, just like Undyne the Undying, only for him to go down after taking a single hit. The Neo form doesn't even get a chance to show off any of its abilities. Even if you wait for him to attack, he never does. It's only there to show just how powerful Genocide Frisk has become, and that's it. So as such, since there's nothing to work with, I won't be including it in this moveset. And no, I won't look at fan ideas for it. I've made it clear that I only use what's official to the games when I make these movesets. No fan stuff, no fan AUs, none of that. With that said, however, the reason why I bring this up at all is because even though using the form itself is out of the question, using elements from it as a reference could be a thing. So, for Mettaton EX's up special, he could use the most in-your-face asset of the Neo form that's more than likely the first thing people are going to see. His wings! I'll call this special the Wings of Neo. Mettaton will spawn them on his back and will fly into any chosen direction based on controller input. He flies a pretty far distance, but this is only a recovery as it won't deal any damage to foes, just like how the Neo form itself is completely harmless, and it will put him into freefall after he uses it. And of course, for his down special, this will just allow him to transform back into the much heavier box form. And those are the core differences between Mettaton's two forms. However, there is one major thing that I've yet to go over that's pretty important to Mettaton, regardless of his appearance. So for a quick recap on the mechanical differences between Mettaton's two forms, the box form is very heavy, hard to KO, and has impressive range, but is incredibly sluggish with poor mobility. Whereas the EX form is very fast, has great combo potential, but is also incredibly light and doesn't have as good of range as the box form does. But there's one thing that I haven't mentioned about either of them: their damage output. Who deals more damage? Well, actually, they both deal the same amount of damage. The problem is, at the start of the match, that damage will be very weak. And how do you improve Mettaton's performance? Well, by being a great performer and increasing his ratings. Ratings for his shows are one of the most important things to Mettaton, and they're outright crucial to finish his fight with him passively. Mettaton will have a ratings counter by his damage icon, one that's constantly fluctuating throughout the entire match depending on your actions. The ratings will very slowly decrease as time passes automatically. After all, it's not very interesting when nothing happens during a show. See what I mean? But doing specific things will change whether Mettaton's ratings go up or down. To get his ratings to go up, you need to land hits on your foes, get KOs, or even get combos to make for an impressive spectacle. But getting hit yourself, throwing out attacks that don't hit anyone, or getting KO'd can result in a decrease in your ratings. Of course, you don't want that to happen, because the higher Mettaton's ratings are, the more damage his attacks will deal overall. Having his rating system can be an incentive for certain players to try different playstyles with both forms. Maybe you want to play it safe at first and stick with the box form until you can get your ratings high enough so that you can change into the EX form and dish out some major punishment. Or you can start with EX form to try to get more combos to try to boost your ratings sooner, but then change to the box form when you're worried about being KO'd. Overall, it'd be up to you. But in order for Mettaton to be the most Mettaton that Mettaton can possibly Mettaton, you have to be willing to work to put on a spectacular show. Just like Mettaton. Mettaton will have 2 final smashes depending on which form he currently is when he uses it. While in box form, he'll pull out the infamous tile puzzle. Upon activation, the entire stage will be replaced and covered with multicolored tiles, and 4 fire bars will surround the entire puzzle, trapping all opponents inside to be forced to play this unforgiving game. Each player will be subjugated to whatever tile color that's currently behind them, and this will keep changing as they pass over each new tile and search for safety. Red tiles are solid and cannot be passed through. Orange tiles make the player orange scented and will cause players to take extra damage when hurt. Purple tiles are slippery, but they'll also remove the orange scent. Yellow tiles are electric, cannot be passed through, and will cause damage. Blue tiles act as water tiles, which are safe by themselves, unless it's adjacent to a yellow tile, in which case it'll cause damage, and if the player is orange scented, then they'll also take damage from blue tiles. Then there are pink tiles, which are safe spots, and that's the best case scenario for hopefully getting away from this unscathed. And finally, there are green tiles, which at first don't do anything, but after 5 seconds of puzzle chaos has passed, any player who passed the green tile even once will be tossed a bomb by Mettaton, which will deal large knockback to the poor foe, after which the tiles and flame bars will disappear as the stage returns to normal. Now for EX's final smash, this will have him give his foes a heart-to-heart and unleash his own soul to teach his foes the true definition of stage fright. The soul will float above Mettaton in whatever spot he was standing, and will begin to fire a bullet hell volley of electricity into all directions. Each bolt fire can deal quite a bit of damage and knockback. Also, blocks will encircle Mettaton, which can damage foes who touch them, and many Mettatons will fly all over the place throwing hearts at foes. And right before the final smash ends, the heart will release bolts of lightning that quickly home in on all foes, which will deal massive knockback to anyone inevitably hit by them. They say lightning never strikes in the same place twice, but Mettaton wholeheartedly disagrees. For colors, all of Mettaton's alts could not only be references to various characters or things related to Mettaton, but they could also be equivalents to some of the colors used in the tile puzzle. The first alt can make Mettaton the colors of the yellow tile, but this could also make reference to the yellow soul used to fight him, as well as his creator Dr. Alphys, and maybe even the statue of himself in the hotel lobby. His second color could have him in green, though his EX form could also have some light blue shades, which could be in reference to Shyren, who he does ask to be his backup singer and the true pacifist ending of the game. Next could be a red color, which could reference his red news anchor suit. Then could be a light pink color, which could reference Dr. Alphys' favorite anime character, Mew Mew Kissy Cutie. Then it can be an orange color, which could simply reference Mettaton's lowly underpaid employee, Burger Pants. Next could be a dark blue alt, only referencing the blue tile from the puzzle, and that's really it. And last but not least, he can be in as black and white battle colors, the same that you see when you fight him in Undertale. And even though it's really not, this would be the closest thing that we'd get to Napstablook colors. For the stage intro, it'd be the same for both. A smoke screen would appear with spotlights pointing into them, and when it clears, you see Mettaton emerge from the smoke, and he'd yell, "It's showtime!" Now for Mettaton's taunts, these will actually be much more important than you'd think, because they'd actually be used to affect your rating system. Each taunt would correspond with the various acts that Frisk must use to increase ratings during Mettaton's fight, and they'd work near identically here to help with gaining Mettaton's ratings if used properly. The first taunt will be Boast. Once used, it'll have the ratings increase instead of decrease for 5 seconds. However, if you're hit at all during those 5 seconds, you'll actually lose a lot of rating. So it's risky to use, but satisfying if you can back up your boast. Speaking of which, each Mettaton form will say a different thing for this taunt. box form will say, "Enough about you, let's talk about me." And the EX form will say, "I'm the idol everyone craves." Both fairly boastful comments if you ask me. Now for the second taunt, this could be the pose taunt. One that you might find yourself spamming quite often, because each time you use it, it raises the ratings by a fair amount. And because you'll probably be using it a lot, each Mettaton form will do a different stylish pose each time it's used. There's also a small chance for them to say a line. Box form can say, "Oh yes." And EX form can say, "Absolutely beautiful." And for the final taunt, this could be the heel turn taunt. If you use this one, then your ratings will increase whenever you take damage for 5 seconds instead of decreasing, as the audience craves justice for your heel turning attitude. Box form for this taunt will say, "It's Attack of the Killer Robot." And the EX form can say, "Drama, romance, bloodshed." Now I know some of you might be concerned about having this much functionality in the taunt, considering that you can't taunt in online quick play in Smash Ultimate. Well, let me just reiterate, I don't make these movesets with the idea of these characters getting into Smash Ultimate specifically. Remember, these are not prediction videos by any means. These are purely theoretical ideas for if these characters got into Smash in general, which is why I don't usually care about what's obviously impossible based on Smash Ultimate standards. But even then, Kirby's taunt to drop copy ability still works in online quick play, so it can be the same for Mettaton. Using the taunt button may not actually have him use the taunt, but the effects from it could still be active, that's all. Overall, I just feel that taunting should be a very important thing for Mettaton to do, because that's what he does, that's his personality, so spamming taunts during a fight with him only makes sense. In any which case, finally for Mettaton's victory animations, starting with his box form, the first could start with nothing being on screen, until he randomly bursts through a hole that comes out of nowhere to pose, which also reveals that the background you were looking at was actually just a backdrop. His second can show Mettaton wearing his dress and pose dramatically while being showered with roses and petals, stereotypically what you'd see when a stage performer has completed their show at the end. And his final can just show Mettaton seductively lying on a piano while slowly feeding himself grapes. How does he eat the grapes? I don't know, but he does this when he visited Undyne's house with Alphys, and this is also referenced again on the Collector's Edition soundtrack art. And for EX's animations, his first can have him do a rapid fire of random poses, and then end with a really stylish pose with a spotlight on him. His second can show him slide in on his knees while laughing, then poses. Also for some reason his arms would be missing, but who needs arms when you got legs like that, right? And the final can show Mettaton accompanied by his tour band, with Napstablook as the DJ and Shiren as the backup singer. Mettaton, of course, will take the center stage as he dances for an encore. Also, Burger Pants will be far in the background hiding in a bush, because why not? Whew. Well, that's everything. Well, I'm glad you approve. Not gonna lie, this was a lot of fun to do. I guess. But hey, you know what? I have to thank you. Well, since you forced your way into episode 49, this means I can save episode 50 for someone truly special. Well, this is a really big milestone for my series. 50 episodes? That's just amazing to me. And I think it'd be great to do a really big character instead of just somebody else from your game. I'm sorry? Nope, sorry, it's already done. Whew, sorry about that. Took me a while to get him out of here. But in any which case, that does it for What If Mettaton Was in Smash? Honestly, Sans may be my favorite Undertale character, but Mettaton is a very close second. He has so much personality, and he makes everything so much more lively. And I just know that if he were to ever join the Smash roster, he'd be an awesome character to make the game so much more, dare I say, fabulous. Anyways, if you liked what you saw and would like to see even more characters be given possible Smash movesets, be sure to subscribe. And if you'd like to support the show and help me be able to make more content for you guys while you also get some perks for doing so, you can click the join button either below the video or my main page to become a sponsor for my channel. I'd really appreciate anything that can be contributed. And of course, if you have a character that you'd like to see me given a possible Smash moveset, leave a comment down below or contact me on Twitter at BrawlFan1 on Twit. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching!